Roy Bennett never expected trouble when he walked through the marketplace. The trading floor of Gateway Station 7 stretched out like a metal canyon, filled with merchants from 100 different worlds. Voices echoed off the high ceiling, some speaking in clicks, others in musical tones that hurt human ears. Roy kept his head down and his business to himself. That was the smart way to operate out here. Bear walked beside him, massive paws clicking against the metal floor. The dog stood nearly waist-high on Roy, covered in thick brown fur that made him look even bigger. People back on Earth always stepped aside when they saw Bear coming. Here in space, the reaction was different. "Look at that thing," someone said in Galactic Common. The translator in Roy's ear converted it instantly. "Is that supposed to be a companion animal?" Roy glanced over. Four aliens stood near a merchant stall, pointing at Bear. The one who spoke was reptilian, scales gleaming under the station lights. His name tag read Sisk. Next to him stood an insect-like creature with too many legs, a bluish amphibian with wet skin, and something that looked like a tall bird with hands instead of wings. "It has fur," the insect one said, mandibles clicking with what might have been laughter. "Actual biological fur." How primitive. Roy kept walking. He had supplies to buy and a schedule to keep. Bear stayed close, ears forward, watching everything with calm brown eyes. The dog had been in space for 3 years now, ever since Roy bought his freighter. Nothing fazed him anymore. "Wait, human," Sis called out. "We want to see your creature up close." The reptilian stepped into Roy's path. The other 3 followed, forming a loose semicircle. Other traders noticed and started to watch. Some even recorded with their personal devices. Roy sighed internally. This was going to be one of those days. "His name is Bear," Roy said quietly. "We're just passing through." "Bear," the bird-like alien repeated. "What does it do? Besides shed everywhere, I mean." The others made sounds that the translator interpreted as laughter. Sisk pulled out a small crystal from his belt pouch. He tossed it in the air, and it floated there, glowing with inner light. Holographic images projected from it, cycling through complex mathematical equations and star charts. "This is a companion creature, grown in the finest labs on my homeworld. It interfaces with any computer system and displays information on command. It cost me 3 months of trade profits." The insect one, whose tag said Brel, gestured behind him. A swarm of tiny metallic objects flew in formation, creating shapes in the air. "My drones act as one mind. They can repair my ship, defend against attackers, or perform surgery if needed. Each one contains processing power that exceeds most planetary computers." Roy said nothing. Bear sat down, tongue hanging out slightly. To anyone watching, he looked like an ordinary dog having an ordinary day. "Your animal just sits there," the amphibian said. Her name was Norva. From her shoulder emerged a serpent-like creature, its skin shifting through colors. Red, blue, green, purple. The changes were hypnotic. "My companion displays my emotional state to other species. It helps in negotiations." "What does yours do?" "He's a good friend," Roy said. That brought more laughter. The bird-like one, Quo, held up a small furry creature that immediately began making sounds. First it mimicked Sisk's voice, then Brel's clicking, then the ambient noise of the marketplace. "Mine can reproduce any sound it hears. Perfect for language learning and entertainment. Your beast probably can't even speak." "He doesn't need to," Roy said. He tried to step around them, but Sisk moved to block him again. "You humans come to civilized space with your unmodified animals," Sisk said. "No enhancements, no programming, no purpose. Do you not understand how embarrassing this is? Every other species has moved beyond simple biology. We improve our companions through technology or breeding programs. What you have there is just a wild animal with a leash." More aliens gathered now, forming a crowd. Roy recognized a few other humans in the distance, but they kept back. Nobody wanted to get involved in station drama. Bear remained sitting, but his eyes tracked every movement around them. The dog's breathing stayed even and calm. "I think the human cannot afford a real companion," Brel said. "Humans are new to space. Perhaps they don't understand our customs yet. We should educate him," Norva added. Show him what proper companion animals can do. Quo's mimic creature began cycling through sounds again, this time making barking noises. It was clearly mocking Bear, who didn't react at all. The crowd found this hilarious. Roy felt heat rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting angry accomplished nothing. These aliens didn't understand. They looked at Bear and saw something primitive, something beneath them. They had their engineered creatures and their programmed drones, and they thought that made them superior. We're leaving, Roy said firmly. He started to walk away, and Bear stood up to follow. Running away, Sis called after them. Typical human behavior. Bring your inferior animal to our station and then flee when challenged. The crowd parted to let them through, and Roy thought maybe it was over. Then he heard the loud mechanical grinding. Everyone's head turned toward the cargo area. One of the massive loaders, a machine designed to move shipping containers, jerked violently. Sparks flew from its control panel. System failure, someone shouted. Get back. The loader's mechanical arms swung wild, knocking over crates. Containers began sliding off its platform, each one weighing several tons. Aliens scrambled away from the cargo area. The four who had mocked Roy pushed backward, their companion creatures forgotten. Roy saw the small figure then. A child, no taller than his knee, stood frozen near the loader. The young alien was Toluvian, with large eyes and delicate limbs. The species was known for being fragile. One of those falling containers would crush the child instantly. The parent screamed from across the cargo area, trapped behind a stack of crates. Roy didn't think. His body moved before his brain caught up, running toward the danger while everyone else ran away. Behind him, he heard the click of claws on metal. Bear had already started moving. Bear, get the kid! Roy shouted. The massive dog shot forward like a missile, covering the distance in heartbeats. His thick fur rippled as muscles bunched and released. This was what people never understood about dogs. They weren't just companions. They were athletes, warriors, protectors. Thousands of years of evolution had created an animal that could think and react faster than most technology. Bear reached the child just as a container began its fall. His jaws closed gently around the young Toluvian's clothing, and he yanked the child backward. The container hit where the child had been standing, the sound like thunder in the enclosed space. More debris fell, and Bear moved again, positioning his body between the child and the danger. The dog was big enough that his body formed a shield, taking hits from smaller pieces while keeping the child safe underneath. Then Bear turned toward the malfunctioning loader. His lips pulled back, and he growled. The sound came from deep in his chest, rolling through the marketplace like a physical force. It wasn't loud in terms of volume. It didn't need to be. The growl carried something else, something that bypassed rational thought and spoke directly to the primitive brain that every species kept buried somewhere. This was the sound of a predator. A real one. Not programmed, not engineered. Real that Sisk's legs buckled. The reptilian hit the floor, his crystal companion shattering on impact. Brell's drones scattered in all directions, their formation broken. Norva's skin flashed pure white, a distress signal her species hadn't used in 10,000 years. Quo's feathers flattened against his body, and his mimic creature went silent for the first time since Roy had seen it. Their jaws literally hung open, unable to process what they were witnessing. All around the marketplace, aliens froze. Station security finally arrived, shutting down the malfunctioning loader, but nobody moved. Hundreds of eyes stared at the human and his dog. The dog who had just saved a child without hesitation. The dog whose single growl had reduced 4 arrogant traitors to trembling messes. Bear sat down, tongue out again, waiting for Roy's next command. Silence filled the marketplace like water poured into a glass. Roy walked slowly toward Bear and the Toluvian child, keeping his movements calm and steady. The dog released the child's clothing and backed up one step, giving the young alien space, but staying close enough to protect if needed. The child's parent finally broke free from behind the crates and ran forward. She was taller than the child, but still small compared to most species on the station. Her hands shook as she knelt beside her offspring, checking for injuries. Finding none, She looked up at Roy with eyes that held too much emotion for his translator to capture properly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, thank you." Roy nodded. Bear did all the work. The mother reached out hesitantly toward Bear. The dog remained still, letting her touch his fur. She pulled her hand back quickly, surprised by how soft it was. The child peeked out from behind the parent and made a small sound. Bear's tail wagged once. Station security surrounded the malfunctioning loader now, their equipment shutting down its systems completely. The security chief, a six-armed species with gray skin and no visible eyes, approached Roy. Her uniform bore marks of high rank. "I need a statement," the chief said. Her voice came through Roy's translator as female and businesslike. "Your creature acted to preserve life. This will be noted in the report." "He's trained for it," Roy said simply. "Trained?" The chief's head tilted in a way that suggested interest. "Your species trains animals for rescue operations?" "Among other things." The chief made a gesture with two of her arms that Roy didn't recognize. "I will review the security footage. Please remain available for additional questions." She moved away, already speaking into a communication device. Roy turned to find the four aliens still on the ground or nearby surfaces, looking stunned. Sisk had managed to sit up, but his scales had lost some of their shine. Brel's legs twitched irregularly. Norva's color had returned to something approaching normal, though patches of white still showed. Quo had his wings wrapped around himself like a blanket. Other traders began moving again, their shock wearing off. Conversations started in dozens of languages, all focused on what they had just witnessed. Recording devices were still active, capturing everything. By tomorrow, this incident would be known on every station in this sector. The tall alien with blue skin and too many joints in its arms approached Roy. The identification badge marked it as Dr. Kellens, a xenobiologist. "I must ask you about your companion animal. What do you call a dog? I have never seen such a creature." Roy sighed. This part always took time. Bear is from Earth. His ancestors were wolves that humans domesticated thousands of years ago. We bred them to work with us, protect us, and be our friends. "Domesticated," Kellens repeated, testing the word. "You mean you altered them genetically?" "No. We selected which ones had puppies, that's all. Over many generations, they became dogs. Different from their wolf ancestors, but not through engineering. Through partnership." Kellens's eyes widened. His species used large round eyes to show interest. Natural selection guided by cooperation. Remarkable. And this one's capabilities? Bear can track scents across kilometers, hear sounds I never will, and react faster than most technology. He understands over 200 words and dozens of hand signals. But more than that, he wants to protect. That's built into him after thousands of years of living with humans. "Without programming," Kellens said softly. "Simply because of the relationship between your species." "Yes." The xenobiologist looked at Bear with new respect. "Would you permit me to include this incident in my research? I study companion species across the galaxy. Nothing compares to what I just witnessed." Roy considered this. As long as Bear isn't hurt or bothered. He's not a lab specimen. Of course not. Simply observation and questions, if you're willing. Kellens pulled out a small device and began recording notes, his multiple fingers moving rapidly. The Teluvian mother approached again, her child clinging to her side. "I'm Pella. This is Ravin. We will tell everyone what happened here today. Our people will know about humans and their dogs." "We were just in the right place," Roy said. "No," Pella said firmly. "You ran toward danger when everyone else ran away. Your companion saved my child without hesitation. This is not luck. This is character." Ravin peeked out again and made a chirping sound at Bear. The dog's tail wagged properly this time, the big sweeping wag that meant he was happy. The child laughed, a musical sound that made several nearby aliens turn and smile. Sisk finally stood up, his movements shaky. He approached Roy with his head lowered, a gesture that Roy's cultural database said meant shame in a species. "Human Roy Bennett, I spoke poorly of you and your companion. I see now that I understood nothing." The other three came forward as well, each looking uncomfortable in different ways. Brel's antennae drooped. Norva couldn't seem to settle on one color. Quo's feathers remained flat. We judged without knowledge, Brell said. This is inexcusable behavior. Our companions are tools. Useful tools, but tools nonetheless. What you have is something else entirely. Roy wanted to be angry. Part of him was. They had mocked Bear, insulted them both, and blocked their path. But looking at them now, he saw something he recognized. Confusion. They genuinely didn't understand what they had witnessed, and it scared them. Bear growled at the machine, Roy said quietly. Not at any of you. He was warning it to stay away from the child. That's what guard dogs do. They put themselves between threats and the things they protect. But it's a machine, Norvis said. It has no consciousness to understand a warning. Bear doesn't know that. He just knows something dangerous was moving toward a kid. His instinct took over. Quo's head bobbed in what might have been a nod. Instinct, not programming, not commands from you. He chose to act. Dogs always choose, Roy said. That's what makes them special. We train them, guide them, but in the moment, they make their own decisions. Bear could have stayed back. I would never punish him for choosing safety. But he didn't. He never does. Sisk picked up the broken pieces of his crystal companion. The light inside had died. I paid enormous sums for this. It was supposed to be the finest companion technology could produce. Yet it shattered from stress. Your dog ran into danger and emerged unharmed. Different tools for different purposes, Roy said. Your crystal is great for data. Bear is great for protection. Neither one is better, just different. But even as he said it, Roy knew that wasn't quite true. The four aliens knew it too. They had seen something today that challenged everything they believed about companion animals and what made them valuable. Dr. Kellens finished his notes and looked up. This event will have consequences. Other species will want to study Earth animals. Some may even want to acquire them. Roy shook his head. Dogs aren't cargo. They're family members. Anyone who wants one needs to understand that first. Family, Kellens repeated. Yes, I see. The bond goes both directions. You care for him as much as he cares for you. More, Roy said. He's better than me in most ways. Bear, hearing his name in the conversation, looked up at Roy. His tail wagged again. In the dog's simple view of the universe, everything was fine now. There had been a threat, he had dealt with it, and now his human was nearby. Life was good. The marketplace slowly returned to normal operations. Traders went back to their business, though many still glanced toward Roy and Bear. The cargo area was cordoned off while technicians examined the malfunctioning loader. Station security moved through the crowd, taking statements from witnesses. Pella and Ravin stayed close. The child had worked up the courage to pet Bear's head, giggling when the dog's tongue licked small fingers. The mother recorded this with her device, clearly planning to share it widely. The four aliens stood together, speaking in low voices. Roy caught fragments of their conversation. They were questioning their own cultures now, wondering why natural evolution had been abandoned in favor of engineering. One breakthrough moment could do that, shake foundations that seemed solid for centuries. Roy checked his supply list. He still needed to finish his shopping, still had a schedule to keep. But something had changed. The way other aliens looked at him now carried respect instead of dismissal. Some even moved out of Bear's way preemptively, giving the dog space. Come on, boy, Roy said. Let's get what we came for. Bear stood and followed, staying a heel position without being told. The crowd parted naturally this time. No one mocked. No one laughed. They had all seen what a human's best friend could do when it mattered most. And somewhere in that crowd, dozens of beings began reconsidering what they thought they knew about Earth and its inhabitants. 2 days passed before Roy saw the four aliens again. He had been avoiding the marketplace, choosing to order supplies through his ship's computer instead. Bear didn't care either way. As long as he got his walks and his food, the dog was content. Right now, Bear was sprawled across Roy's bunk in the small freighter, snoring loud enough to rattle the wall panels. Someone knocked on the outer airlock. Roy checked the security screen and saw Sisk standing there alone, holding a small container. The reptilian scales were duller than before, and his posture suggested nervousness. Roy considered pretending he wasn't home, then decided against it. Might as well deal with this. He opened the airlock. What do you want? To apologize properly, Sisk said, and to ask questions if you'll permit me. Roy stepped aside, letting the alien enter. Bear lifted his head from the bunk, assessed the visitor, and went back to sleep. Sisk stared at the dog with an expression Roy couldn't quite read. "He's not concerned about me at all," Sisk observed. "You're not a threat," Roy said. "Bear knows the difference." Sisk held out the container. "This is a gift from my world. Crystals similar to my companion device, but unprocessed. They're beautiful without being functional. I thought perhaps you might appreciate beauty for its own sake, given what I've learned about you." Roy took the container. Inside were 3 crystals that caught the ship's light and split it into rainbows. They were beautiful. "Thank you. I have been researching Earth since our encounter," Sisk said. "Your planet is classified as a death world by galactic standards. Extreme weather, dangerous predators, diseases that affect multiple species. Most civilized races would consider it uninhabitable. We call it home," Roy said with a shrug. "Yes, and you evolved there alongside creatures like your bear. Reading about it is one thing. Seeing it demonstrated is entirely different." Sisk moved to one of the ship's small chairs, waiting for permission. Roy nodded, and the alien sat carefully. "My species eliminated dangerous animals from our world 16,000 years ago. We engineered what we needed and destroyed what we didn't. We thought this made us advanced." "It did," Roy said. "You survived. That's what matters. But we lost something." Sisk's eyes focused on Bear. "We lost the ability to live alongside danger, to respect it, to work with it instead of simply removing it. Your species kept your predators and learned from them. That requires courage we've forgotten." Roy filled a water bowl for Bear, who woke up long enough to drink, then returned to the bunk. "Dogs aren't predators anymore." "Not really. They're partners." "They were predators." "Wolves," you said. "Your ancestors took the most dangerous animal on your world and made it family." "How?" "Time, mostly. And choosing the wolves that wanted to be around humans. We fed them. They helped us hunt. Over generations, the ones that were friendliest had more puppies. Those puppies were even friendlier. Eventually you get dogs." Sisk was quiet for a moment. "We would have killed the wolves, eliminated the threat. Then you wouldn't have dogs." "No. We would have crystal companions and drones and engineered servants. All very efficient. All very safe. All very—" Sisk searched for the word. "Lonely." That surprised Roy. He had expected questions about training techniques or breeding programs, not philosophy. "You have companions. We have tools that look like companions." "I see that now. When my crystal shattered, I felt nothing but financial loss. When I saw your bear protecting that child, I saw something I'd never experienced. Devotion. Not programmed loyalty, but genuine choice to protect another being." Bear chose that moment to roll onto his back, legs in the air, making sounds in his sleep, probably dreaming about chasing something. Roy smiled despite himself. "He dreams," Sisk said with wonder. "Of course he does. He's not a machine. Bad dreams sometimes too. I have to wake him up, let him know he's safe. And he trusts you to do that." "Yes." Sisk stood and walked closer to the bunk. Bear's nose twitched, but he didn't wake. "May I touch him?" "Slowly. Let him see your hand first." The alien extended one scaled hand toward Bear's head. The dog's eyes opened, focused on the hand, then on Sisk's face. Bear's tail thumped once against the bunk. "Permission granted." Sisk touched the soft fur and made a sound Roy's translator couldn't interpret. "It's warm," Sisk said. "Living warmth, not thermal regulation. He generates heat because he's alive, not because he's programmed to maintain optimal temperature. All mammals do. We're cold-blooded. Heat comes from our environment, not from within. Perhaps that's why we think in terms of external solutions. Engineering, programming, modification. We don't understand that some things must come from inside." Sisk withdrew his hand, and Bear went back to sleep. The others want to visit as well. Brel, Norva, and Quo. They're waiting at a cafe near the dock. "We didn't want to overwhelm you all at once." Roy checked the time. He had nowhere to be for another 6 hours. "Fine. But Bear needs a walk first. He can meet them at the cafe. They would be honored." 20 minutes later, Roy and Bear approached an outdoor seating area near the station's main promenade. Brel, Norva, and Quo sat at a table designed for mixed species, each on a different type of chair. They stood when they saw Roy coming, a sign of respect he hadn't expected. "Please sit," Brell said, his mandibles clicking nervously. "We ordered food for humans. Hopefully it's acceptable." Roy sat, and Bear settled beside his chair, watching the foot traffic with interest. A server brought something that looked vaguely like a sandwich and smelled edible. Roy took a bite. "Not bad. I got rid of my drones," Brell said abruptly. "Sold them yesterday." Roy stopped chewing. "Why?" "Because I realized they were making me stupid. I relied on them for everything. Maintenance, navigation, security. I forgot how to do these things myself. When they scattered during the incident, I was helpless. I don't want to be helpless." "You're not getting a dog instead, are you?" Roy asked carefully. "Because that's not the solution either. Dogs are a lot of work." "No, I'm learning to do things with my own hands again. Or mandibles, in my case." Brell gestured with several legs. "My species used to be expert builders. We created beautiful structures using only our bodies and natural materials. Then we invented machines to do it for us, and we forgot our skills. I'm going to remember." Norva's colors shifted through a pattern Roy was starting to recognize as embarrassment. "I still have my serpent companion, but I'm interacting with it differently, trying to understand what it feels instead of just using it as a display device. Yesterday, it showed colors I'd never seen before. I think it was happy." "You think?" Roy asked. "I never paid attention before. Now I am. It's changing how I see everything." Quo ruffled his feathers, a grooming behavior that suggested nervousness. "My mimic creature died." Roy felt a pang of sympathy. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was old. I worked it too hard, making it perform constantly. I never let it rest. When it died, I realized I had treated a living thing as entertainment. I'm not replacing it. I don't deserve another one until I understand what I did wrong." These 4 aliens had changed drastically in just 2 days. One moment of seeing what a real bond looked like had shaken their entire worldview. Roy wasn't sure if that was good or bad. "You don't have to punish yourselves," Roy said. "You didn't know any better. Now you do. That's what matters." "But we should have known," Sisk said. "Every species in the galaxy has legends about companionship, about bonds that transcend utility. We just stopped believing them because technology seemed more reliable." A small crowd had gathered nearby, watching them. Roy recognized some of the faces from the marketplace incident. Word had spread fast. The 4 aliens who mocked a human now sat with him in public, clearly seeking his guidance. That meant something in station politics. Bear noticed a child nearby, another Teluvian. The dog's tail wagged, and the child approached cautiously. Roy nodded permission. The child touched Bear's head gently, then giggled and ran back to its parent. "That child's entire generation will grow up knowing about dogs," Norva said, "knowing that humans bring something special to the galaxy. You've changed how a whole species thinks about Earth. Bear did that, not me. You chose to bring him to space. You chose to train him for protection. You chose to run toward danger instead of away. Those were your choices." Sisk leaned forward. "We're asking for your help, not just the 4 of us. Others on the station want to learn about natural bonds, about working with animals instead of engineering them. Will you teach us?" Roy looked at each of them. They were serious. This wasn't about feeling guilty anymore. They genuinely wanted to learn. "I'm a freighter pilot, not a teacher. You know things we don't. That makes you a teacher whether you want to be or not." Bear yawned, showing all his teeth. The 4 aliens tensed slightly, then relaxed when the dog just laid his head on his paws. That reaction, that moment of instinctive fear followed by rational calm, told Roy everything he needed to know. They were learning already. "Fine," Roy said, "but we do this properly. No experiments on Bear, no pushing him to perform tricks, no treating him like a specimen. He's family. You understand that first, or we don't do this at all." 4 heads nodded in unison. "We understand." "Good. Then let's start with the basics." 3 weeks after the incident, Roy found himself in a conference room he never expected to see. Station administration had set aside a large space specifically for what they were calling natural companion studies. 20 aliens from 14 different species sat in chairs arranged in a semicircle, all watching Roy and Bear with intense interest. Dr. Kellens stood beside Roy, serving as a scientific advisor. The xenobiologist had become something of a friend over the past weeks, asking questions that showed genuine curiosity rather than condescension. Sisk, Brel, Norva, and Quo sat in the front row, ready to help with demonstrations. Before we start, Roy said, feeling uncomfortable with so many eyes on him, I need to make something clear. This isn't about making your species more like humans. It's about understanding a different approach to companionship. Your cultures are valid. Your companion animals are valid. This is just another option. A centipede-like alien in the third row raised several limbs. Question: can any species bond with animals the way humans do? Or is this unique to your biology? Any species can bond with another if there's mutual benefit and respect. Humans aren't special. We just spent a really long time figuring out how to work with other Earth animals. You could do the same with animals from your worlds. But most of our worlds don't have large predators anymore, another alien said. This one looked like a walking plant, with leaves instead of hair. We eliminated them for safety. Then you need to reintroduce them carefully or find animals that still exist. Or you could work with Earth animals if they can survive in your environment. But that takes generations, not years. Patience is the key. Bear sat beside Roy's chair, looking bored. The dog had spent 3 weeks being stared at, and he clearly preferred the old routine of just flying cargo routes and taking walks. Roy scratched behind his ears, and Bear's tail wagged half-heartedly. Let's start with basic training, Roy said. Bear, sit. The dog was already sitting, but he shifted slightly to show he'd heard the command. A few aliens made notes on their personal devices. Sit is easy. Dog's naturally sit. I just taught Bear to do it when I say the word. We use positive reinforcement, meaning he gets something good when he obeys. Usually treats or praise. Roy pulled a small dried meat strip from his pocket. Bear down. Bear lay down, eyes fixed on the treat. Roy gave it to him immediately. The timing matters. If I wait too long, he won't connect the reward with the action. It needs to be instant. What if he doesn't obey? Brel asked. Then he doesn't get the treat. I don't punish him for failing. I just try again later or find a better way to teach him. Norva's colors shifted to confused purple. No punishment at all? How does he learn what's wrong? He learns what's right, which is more important. If I focus on rewarding good behavior, he'll repeat it because he wants the reward. If I punish bad behavior, he learns to fear me, not to understand what I want. But fear is an effective motivator, one of the other aliens said. Short term, maybe. Long term, it destroys trust. And without trust, you don't have a bond. You just have obedience based on fear, which breaks the moment you're not around to enforce it. Roy demonstrated several more commands. Bear performed each one, though his enthusiasm was clearly fading. After 10 minutes, Roy called a break. He's done for now. Dogs have attention spans. Push too hard, and they stop learning. So do most species, Kellens noted. But we often forget that when designing training programs. Sisk raised a hand. Can we discuss the incident from 3 weeks ago? Specifically, how Bear knew to protect the child without being commanded. That's harder to explain, Roy admitted. Bear has protective instincts because his ancestors were bred to guard livestock and people. But he also reads situations. He saw the danger, saw the child, and understood what needed to happen. That's not just training. That's intelligence and choice. Choice, Quo repeated. You keep using that word. You believe your dog chooses to obey you. I know he does. Watch. Roy stood up and walked to the other side of the room. Bear stayed where he was, watching but not moving. I didn't tell him to stay. He's choosing to wait because he trusts me to come back. Bear, come. The dog trotted over immediately, tail wagging. Roy knelt and hugged him, and Bear leaned into the embrace. Several aliens made surprise sounds. You show physical affection, the plant-like alien observed. This is common with human companion animals. With any companion you love, Roy said. Bear isn't just a working dog. He's family. I care about his happiness as much as my own, but he's not sentient in the way we define sentience, another alien argued. He can't discuss philosophy or mathematics. No, but he understands loyalty, joy, fear, and love. That's a different kind of intelligence. Maybe it's not lesser, just different. That created a stir among the audience. Several aliens began talking to each other in languages Roy's translator struggled to follow. Kellens held up a hand for quiet. I think what Roy is suggesting challenges our traditional hierarchy of intelligence. We rank beings by their ability to process information and solve complex problems. But emotional intelligence might be equally valuable. Earth's environment forced humans to value emotional bonds, Roy added. When everything around you is trying to kill you, having allies you can trust completely becomes survival. Dogs provided that. In return, we protected them, fed them, and made them part of our families. Both species benefited. Norva's colors showed deep thought, cycling through blues and greens. My world was terraformed before my species evolved sentience. We've never faced significant predators. Perhaps that's why we don't understand what you have with Bear. We've never needed that kind of bond. You can still create it, Roy said. It just starts differently. Find an animal on your world, any animal, and spend time with it. Not trying to train it or use it, just being around it, learning its patterns, its likes and dislikes, building trust. Eventually, you might find that bond forming naturally. The plant-like alien's leaves rustled. This sounds more like meditation than training. Maybe it's both. For the next hour, Roy answered questions about everything from diet to medical care to how dogs sleep. Bear demonstrated his tolerance by allowing several aliens to pet him under careful supervision. Only one, a being made mostly of energy fields, couldn't interact with him physically, but even that one observed with clear interest. During a break, Pella and Ravin entered the room. The Teluvian mother had asked to attend, wanting to show other species what Bear had done for her family. Ravin ran straight to Bear, who stood up and wagged his tail enthusiastically. The child had visited several times over the past weeks, and Bear clearly remembered. May Ravin play with him? Pella asked. Sure. Bear loves kids. For several minutes, the room watched as a Teluvian child and an Earth dog played a simple game of chase around the conference room. Bear kept his movements gentle, never using his full speed or strength. When Ravin tired, the dog laid down and let the child use him as a pillow. That, Kellen said quietly to the audience, is what we're trying to understand. Cross-species empathy. Bear knows Ravin is fragile and adjusts his behavior accordingly. Nobody programmed that response. He learned it through interaction and care. Sisk stood up. I have an announcement. My government has approved a program to study our world's remaining wild animals. We're going to attempt what humans did thousands of years ago. It will take generations, perhaps centuries, but we're going to try. Same with my people, Brell added. We found records of insects that used to live alongside us before we mechanized everything. We're bringing them back. Norva and Quo nodded as well, indicating their species were pursuing similar programs. The idea was spreading. What started with one human and one dog was becoming a galactic movement. An alarm chimed softly. Roy checked the time and stood up. That's all for today. Bear needs his walk, and I need to prep my ship for tomorrow's cargo run. The alien stood as well, many approaching to thank Roy personally. Several asked if they could attend future sessions. Roy agreed, though he was already feeling overwhelmed. This wasn't what he signed up for when he brought Bear to space. Outside the conference room, Kellens walked with them toward the docking bay. You're changing minds, Roy. In just 3 weeks, you've challenged assumptions that stood for thousands of years across dozens of cultures. I'm just talking about my dog. You're showing people there's more than one way to live. That's powerful. Bear pulled toward a green space area, and Roy let him explore. The dog sniffed every surface, marked a few spots, and generally acted like the simple animal everyone thought he was before the incident. But Roy knew better. So did everyone who had witnessed what Bear could do when it mattered. That a message appeared on Roy's communicator. It was from station administration, marked priority. Roy opened it and read quickly, then read it again to make sure he understood. Problem? Kellens asked. They want me to stay on the station for 6 months. Official position as an advisor on natural companion animals. Full salary, housing, everything. Will you accept? Roy looked at Bear, who was now rolling in a patch of actual grass that someone had imported at great expense. The dog's legs kicked in the air, his expression pure happiness. This was what mattered. Not conferences or speeches or changing galactic culture. Just a human and his dog living their lives. I'll think about it, Roy said, but deep down, he already knew his answer. If this helped even one species rediscover what they'd lost, maybe it was worth staying a while longer. 5 months had passed since Roy agreed to stay on Gateway Station 7. His freighter sat and used in Dock Bay 12, accumulating fees he could now easily pay. The advisor position came with a small apartment near the green zone where Bear could run without bothering anyone. Life had become routine in a way Roy never expected. Today was different, though. Today, ships were arriving from 20 systems, each bringing representatives who wanted to see the famous Earth dog and learn about natural companionship. Station administration had organized what they were calling the first interspecies bonding symposium. Roy thought the name was ridiculous, but nobody asked his opinion. Bear didn't care about any of it. Right now, the dog was sprawled across their apartment floor, chewing a toy that Ravin had made for him. The Teluvian child visited 3 times a week now, always bringing homemade gifts. Ravin's drawings of Bear covered one wall of the apartment, each one showing the dog as some kind of hero. "Big day today, boy," Roy said, finishing his coffee. "Lots of new people to meet." Bear's tail thumped once, but he didn't look up from his toy. Roy smiled. At least someone wasn't stressed about this. The symposium was being held in the station's largest conference center, a space that could hold 500 beings comfortably. When Roy arrived with Bear, he found it completely full. Standing room only. Security had to control the crowd outside, who couldn't get in. Cameras were everywhere, broadcasting to dozens of worlds. Kellens met them at the entrance. "Ready for this?" "No," Roy said honestly. "Good. Neither is anyone else." The xenobiologist led them to a raised platform where chairs had been arranged. Sisk, Brel, Norva, and Quo were already there, along with several other speakers Roy had met over the past months. The symposium started with formal introductions that Roy barely heard. His attention was on Bear, who sat calmly despite hundreds of eyes watching him. The dog had adapted to station life better than Roy had. Nothing fazed him anymore. Finally, it was Roy's turn to speak. He stood, and the room went silent. "I'm not a scientist," Roy began. "I'm not a philosopher or a cultural expert. I'm a cargo pilot who happens to have a dog. But over the past 5 months, I've learned something important. What we have, humans and dogs, isn't special because we're special. It's special because we put in the time." He gestured to Bear. "This dog's ancestors were predators that would have killed my ancestors. But somewhere, thousands of years ago, a wolf and a human looked at each other and thought maybe they could help each other. The wolf got food. The human got protection. Both got companionship. That first moment of cooperation started everything." A hand raised in the audience. Roy nodded. "But that was chance," the alien said. "You were lucky your predators could be domesticated." "Maybe. But you have animals on your worlds too. Different ones, sure, but animals that could partner with you if you tried. The question is whether you want to put in the generations of work it takes to build that relationship." Another hand. "Several species here have already begun programs based on your example. How long before we see results?" Roy shook his head. "You won't. Your children might. Their children definitely will. This isn't a quick process. It took humans 10,000 years to turn wolves into dogs. You might do it faster with better knowledge, but it's still going to take time." That created murmuring throughout the crowd. Most species thought in terms of technological solutions that could be implemented within a lifetime. The idea of a project spanning generations was foreign to many of them. Sis stood up. "I want to share what my world has experienced." His scales had regained their shine over the months, and he spoke with confidence now. 5 months ago, we began reintroducing wild animals to controlled habitats. Small creatures, not predators. Yesterday, one of our researchers reported that a small mammal approached her repeatedly, apparently seeking food. She fed it. It returned the next day with others. "This is the beginning. My people have similar stories," Brel added. "Insects that used to flee from us now tolerate our presence. It's minor, but it's progress." Norva's colors showed excitement. "My serpent companion laid eggs last week. I didn't even know it was female until then. I've learned more about this creature in 5 months than in the 10 years I owned it before. All because I started paying attention. Quote, ruffled his feathers. I haven't replaced my mimic creature. Instead, I've been visiting a wildlife preserve on my homeworld. There's a bird there, wild and unmodified. It watches me when I visit. Yesterday, it came closer. Not close enough to touch, but closer than before. I feel like I'm earning its trust. Roy felt something swell in his chest. Pride, maybe. These four aliens had taken his words seriously and acted on them. They were changing their entire approach to life because of one incident in a marketplace. The symposium continued with presentations from various specialists. Evolutionary biologists discussed domestication theory. Psychologists explored bonding mechanisms. Even military strategists talked about how Earth animals could assist in rescue operations. Bear slept through most of it, snoring softly. During lunch break, Roy found himself surrounded by aliens wanting to pet Bear or ask questions. The dog handled it well, accepting attention from anyone who approached gently. One alien, a crystalline being that communicated through light patterns, couldn't touch Bear, but projected colors that the dog seemed to find interesting. Bear watched the light show, tilting his head in confusion. Pella and Ravin arrived during lunch. The child had grown noticeably in 5 months, now nearly as tall as Roy's waist. Ravin ran to Bear immediately, and the dog's entire demeanor changed. His tail wagged harder, his movements became playful. This was his favorite person on the station besides Roy. We brought something, Pella said. She held out a data chip. Ravin's teacher asked the class to write about heroes. Ravin wrote about Bear. We thought you should have a copy. Roy took the chip. Thank you. That means a lot. No, thank you. You saved my child and taught us that strength comes in many forms. The Toluvian Council is voting next month on whether to study our world's remaining wildlife. Before your dog, we would have voted no without discussion. Now it will likely pass. Another species changing because of Bear. Roy wasn't sure how he felt about that responsibility. The afternoon session focused on practical applications. Medical professionals discussed animal-assisted therapy. Educators talked about teaching empathy through interspecies interaction. Engineers proposed habitats that could support both sentient species and their animal companions. Then someone Roy didn't recognize stood up. I have a concern. What prevents humans from monopolizing this? You have thousands of years of experience with domestication. Other species are starting from zero. Won't this create a power imbalance? Roy considered the question carefully. It could if humans tried to monopolize it. But that's not the goal. Every species should develop relationships with their own world's animals. Earth dogs are great, but they're adapted to Earth and humans. You need companions adapted to you and your environment. But you're teaching us, the alien persisted. That creates dependency. I'm teaching principles, not selling products. Once you understand how bonding works, you can apply it yourself. I won't be around forever. None of us will. But the knowledge spreads and stays. Kellen stood to support this point. Roy is correct. The symposium's goal is education and inspiration, not creating markets. Several academic institutions have already begun sharing research freely across all systems. This benefits everyone. The questioner sat down, apparently satisfied. Roy hoped that was the end of it, but he knew some species would try to commercialize this eventually. That was inevitable. He just had to trust that enough people understood the real value. As evening approached, the symposium began wrapping up. Final statements were made, contact information exchanged, and plans set for follow-up meetings. Bear had been asleep for the last 2 hours, dreaming about whatever dogs dream about. Roy stood for his closing remarks. 5 months ago, people laughed at my dog. They thought he was primitive and useless. Then he saved a life, and everything changed. But here's what I want you to remember. Bear didn't save that child because he's special. He did it because that's what dogs do when they're trained with love and trust. Any animal can become remarkable if you give it the chance. He looked around the room at hundreds of faces from dozens of species. You're all here because you want that. You want companions who choose to be with you. Not because they're programmed, but because they want to. That's available to everyone. It just takes time, patience, and respect. Start with those 3 things, and you'll be amazed at what happens." The room erupted in applause. Not all species showed approval the same way, but the sound was overwhelming. Bear woke up, startled, and looked around in confusion. Roy knelt and scratched his ears. "It's okay, boy. Just a bunch of people who think you're pretty great." Bear's tail wagged. He didn't understand speeches or politics or cultural movements. He just knew his human was nearby and everything was fine. That simple perspective, that ability to find contentment in the moment, was something every being in the room envied. After the symposium ended, Roy and Bear walked back to their apartment through the station's quieter corridors. The dog stopped to sniff at interesting spots, completely unaware that his face was being broadcast across 20 systems right now. Roy's communicator buzzed constantly with messages he'd read later. Tomorrow, things would return to relative normal. More meetings, more questions, more demonstrations. But tonight, Roy was just tired. He opened his apartment door and Bear rushed in, heading straight for his water bowl. Roy's communicator buzzed again. This time he checked it. The message was from station administration. They wanted to extend his contract another 6 months. Double the salary. More resources. Bigger platform. Roy looked at Bear, who had finished drinking and was now standing by the door, waiting for his evening walk. The dog's tail wagged hopefully. "What do you think, boy? Should we stay?" Bear barked once and pawed at the door. "Walk now, decisions later." Roy laughed and grabbed the leash point. 1 year had passed since 4 aliens laughed at Roy Bennett and his dog. Today, Roy stood at the observation window of Gateway Station 7, watching ships come and go while Bear dozed at his feet. The view never got old. Stars scattered across the darkness like someone had spilled diamonds on black cloth. His communicator displayed a message from Earth. His brother wanted to know when he was coming home. Roy had been asking himself the same question for months. "We should probably answer that," Roy said to Bear, who opened one eye, decided nothing important was happening, and went back to sleep. The door chimed. Roy checked the screen and saw Kellens standing outside with someone Roy didn't recognize. He opened the door. "Roy, this is Ambassador Tellen from the Galactic Council," Kellens said. "She wanted to meet you personally." The ambassador was tall and thin, with silver skin that reflected light in strange patterns. She wore formal robes that marked her high status. "Mr. Bennett, I've heard remarkable things about your work here. Just trying to help," Roy said, gesturing for them to enter. Bear stood up politely, tail wagging, and the ambassador reached down to pet him without hesitation. That simple act told Roy she'd done her research. "Beautiful creature," Tellen said. "The footage from a year ago has been viewed billions of times across the galaxy. That single moment changed more minds than decades of diplomatic work. Bear did that, not me. You brought him here. You showed patience when others showed mockery. You taught when you could have walked away." The ambassador straightened. "The council wants to establish an interspecies bonding initiative. Funding, resources, educational programs across all member worlds. We want you to lead it." Roy had been expecting something like this, but hoped he was wrong. "I'm not qualified for that kind of work." "You're the only one qualified," Kellen said. "Every program started in the past year references your methods. Every success story mentions Gateway Station 7. You've become the standard, but I'm just a cargo pilot who understands something most species forgot," Tellen said. "That relationships matter more than efficiency. That patience creates better results than force. That bonds formed naturally last longer than anything engineered." She pulled out a data tablet. "This initiative would reach every system in the council. Billions of beings learning what you've taught here." Roy sat down, and Bear immediately put his head on Roy's lap. The familiar weight was comforting. "What about my actual life? I have a ship. I have cargo routes. I have a simple life that I like. You'd keep all of that. The initiative would run itself after the first year. Your job will be guidance, not management. A few months each year, traveling to different worlds, teaching, consulting. The rest of the time, you could fly your routes like before." It sounded too good to be true. Roy had learned to be suspicious of things that sounded too good. "What's the catch?" Tellen smiled. "No catch. The council genuinely wants to improve interspecies understanding. What you've started here proves it's possible. We're just asking you to help spread it further." I need to think about it. Of course. Take your time. The ambassador handed him the tablet. Everything's explained here. Contact information, terms, benefits. Reach out when you're ready. After they left, Roy read through the proposal properly. It was comprehensive, well-funded, and genuine. They weren't trying to exploit what he'd done. They wanted to honor it by expanding it. Still, something felt wrong. His communicator buzzed. Another message from Earth. His brother again. Then one from his mother. One from his childhood friend. All asking the same question. When was he coming home? Roy had been avoiding that answer because he didn't have one. Gateway Station 7 had become home in the past year. He had friends here now. Sisk, Brel, Norva, and Quo visited weekly. Pella and Ravin felt like family. Even Kellens had become someone Roy trusted completely. But Earth was still Earth. His real home. The place where dogs came from and humans understood them without needing conferences or symposiums. What do we do, boy? Roy asked. Bear looked up at him with simple, trusting eyes. The dog didn't care about initiatives or galactic councils. He just wanted to be wherever Roy was, doing whatever Roy was doing. That was enough for him. Roy's communicator buzzed again. This time it was Sisk. The message was short. Come to the marketplace. Important. Curious. Roy grabbed Bear's leash and headed out. The marketplace looked different now. A year ago, it was just a trading floor. Now, several stalls specialized in natural companion supplies. Food for Earth animals, toys, training guides, translated into dozens of languages. One entire section was dedicated to domestication research. He found the 4 aliens waiting near the spot where everything started. With them stood at least 50 other beings, all holding small animals. Dogs, cats, something that looked like a ferret, birds, even a small primate Roy didn't recognize. What's this? Roy asked. We wanted to show you, Sisk said. Every person here adopted a natural companion in the past year. No modifications, no programming. Just animals and people learning to live together. A small child, not Teluvian this time, but some species Roy couldn't identify, held up a kitten. This is Whisper. She's from Earth. My family got her 3 months ago. She sleeps in my bed, the child said proudly. And she makes me feel safe. Others stepped forward, each sharing their story. An elderly alien whose service dog helped with mobility. A young couple whose cat had helped them through grief. A soldier whose bird reminded him of home during long deployments. Story after story, each one showing how natural bonds had enriched lives. This is just one station, Brel said. Multiply this by every station, every planet, every system that started programs. Millions of beings are experiencing what you showed us. We know you're thinking about leaving, Norva added, her colors showing sadness. Kellens told us about the council's offer. Whatever you decide, we wanted you to see this. To know that what you did mattered. Roy felt something tighten in his chest. He'd spent a year teaching principles and answering questions, but he hadn't seen the actual results spread across the station. These weren't just statistics or reports. These were real people with real animals, building real bonds that a familiar bark made him turn. Ravin was running through the crowd, and behind the child came another dog. Not Bear, but a younger one, maybe 2 years old with golden fur. This is Sonny, Ravin said breathlessly. We adopted him last month. He's not as big as Bear, but he's learning to be brave. The young dog approached Bear cautiously. Bear sniffed him, deemed him acceptable, and the 2 dogs touched noses in greeting. Sonny's tail started wagging so hard his whole body shook. I'm teaching him tricks, Ravin said. Like you taught me. Positive rewards, patience, respect. He's really smart. Pella stood nearby, watching her child interact with their new family member. Ravin talks about becoming a dog trainer when grown. All because of what you showed us. Roy knelt down to pet Sonny, who immediately tried to lick his face. Bear tolerated this with the patience of an older dog who'd seen everything. The 2 dogs began playing gently, aware that Ravin was watching. You created this, Quo said quietly. Not just the adoption program or the training methods. You created hope. You showed us we could have something real instead of artificial. Something that chose to be with us. I didn't do it alone, Roy said. Bear did most of the work. You 4 did the rest by being willing to learn. But you started it, Sisk insisted. And now it's growing beyond what any of us imagined. The council's initiative would spread it even further. You should accept their offer. Roy stood up, watching the crowd. Dozens of species, all united by something simple: love for their animal companions. A year ago, most of these beings would have thought natural bonding was primitive. Now, they understood it was revolutionary. His communicator buzzed. His brother again. This time Roy answered. "Hey, when are you coming home?" His brother's voice came through clear despite the distance. "Soon," Roy said. "Maybe a few more months. There's some things I need to finish here first. Mom's worried about you. Says you've been in space too long. Tell her I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I'll explain when I get back." They talked for a few more minutes about family matters before saying goodbye. Roy looked at the tablet the ambassador had given him, then at the crowd around him, then at Bear and Sunny playing together. The decision had been made somewhere in the past few minutes without him really noticing. He pulled up the council's contact information and sent a message. 3 words. "I accept. Details later." Kellens, who had been watching from a distance, walked over. "You're taking the position? For 1 year. After that, I'm going home to Earth. But 1 year of setting this up properly, making sure it continues without me. That seems fair. More than fair. The galaxy thanks you. The galaxy can thank Bear. I'm just along for the ride." That evening, Roy sent messages to everyone who needed to know. His family, his few friends on Earth, station administration. The contract extension was signed. The council initiative would begin in 3 months, giving Roy time to prepare. Sisk, Brell, Norva, and Quo took him to dinner at the same cafe where they'd sat a year ago. The conversation was easier now, flowing naturally between topics. They talked about their companion animals, their families, their hopes for the future. The awkwardness from a year ago was completely gone. "Do you think it'll last?" Norva asked. "This whole movement toward natural bonding. Or will species eventually go back to engineered companions?" "Both will exist," Roy said. "Some people will always prefer the efficiency of programmed companions. Others will want the unpredictability of natural bonds. There's room for both approaches." "But which is better?" Brell asked. Roy thought about it while finishing his food. "Neither. They're different tools for different needs. But I think natural bonds teach us something important. They teach us patience, empathy, and how to work with others who think differently than us. Those lessons apply to more than just animals." Quo nodded slowly. "You mean they apply to how species interact with each other?" "Exactly. If you can learn to bond with an animal from a completely different evolutionary path, bonding with other sentient species becomes easier. You learn that different doesn't mean wrong. That's why the council wants this to spread," Sisk said. "It's not really about the animals at all, is it? It's about teaching cooperation and understanding through the practice of bonding." "Maybe," Roy admitted. "Or maybe the council just thinks dogs are cute and wants more of them around. Either way, it's a positive thing." They laughed at that, and the conversation moved to lighter topics. Roy relaxed for the first time in weeks. This felt right. Finishing what he'd started, then going home. Not running away, but completing a chapter before starting the next one. Later, walking back to his apartment, Roy stopped at the observation window where the day had started. Bear pressed against his leg, solid and warm and real. "1 more year, boy," Roy said. "Then we go home. Back to Earth, back to simple cargo runs, back to a life where nobody cares if you're famous." "Sound good?" Bear's tail wagged. Everything sounded good to him as long as Roy was there. Down in the marketplace, visible through the window, Roy could see the lights from the new companion animal section. Ships were arriving and departing constantly, spreading the knowledge across systems. In 1 year, it had grown from 4 mockers learning humility to a galaxy-wide movement toward natural bonding. All because a dog did what dogs have always done: protect those who need protecting, love those who love them, and remind everyone that the best relationships are built on trust, not programming. Roy scratched Bear's ears, and the dog leaned into his hand. "You changed a galaxy, you know that?" Bear, of course, didn't know or care. He was just happy to be with his human, doing what dogs have done for 10,000 years. Being a good boy, the best boy, and really that was enough.